We look back at one of the biggest trades in sports history with a man who covered the event here in Los Angeles. That's next on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. And of course, we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years. And of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. Well, 1 week and 35 years ago, August 9th, 1988, the LA Kings acquired the great one, Wayne Gretzky, in what some thought was an unthinkable trade with the Edmonton Oilers. We are going to look back on that with someone who was in LA to cover that event personally. We welcome back to the show Ted Sobel, award-winning LA radio sports reporter and author of the book, Touching Greatness. Hey, Ted, how you doing?
Great, Eddie. Thanks for having me on, and always love reminiscing, especially the most important trade, and not just Kings history, NHL history.
And maybe the biggest shocking trade in sports history, really, at least North American sports. I certainly can't comment on something that happened in soccer in Italy or something like that. But so I have to admit, I mentioned at the beginning, I've been a Kings fan for 30 years. Obviously, I wasn't a Kings fan when this trade happened. This trade is a part of the reason, a big part of the reason why I became a Kings fan and a hockey fan. So obviously, this had a huge impact on me. But I know that we have a Friday feedback show every Friday with the listeners and the viewers. And we had an email this past Friday, and someone who hadn't been a Kings fan like me back in the day wanted to know, because it was the anniversary. And by the way, should have had you on last week for the anniversary, but bad job by me. But how did that trade happen? And it's a great question. Some people don't know. And I think even something that I'm really interested in is they don't know what it felt like when it happened. Now, when it did happen, I remember being a kid who was a huge sports fan. It got my attention. And I knew who Wayne Gretzky was. And I'm like, wow, how could that guy get traded? And then kind of it snowballed from there. So I would like to give people who were not around at that time a sense of maybe what that was like. So let me throw out a couple of scenarios to you.
Okay.
And you tell me, would this even be close to what it felt like when that happened? Because Gretzky just came off winning a championship. Yeah. He was a multiple time MVP and the greatest player in the game. If you woke up today and you found out Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, who's won 2 Super Bowls, just won one last year, who's won multiple MVPs, if you woke up and found out he got traded today, or how about Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets, just won an NBA title, multiple-time MVP. If you woke up this morning and found out he got traded, people's minds would explode. They would be like, how could this happen? Would either of those scenarios kind of capture what it was like when Wayne Gretzky got traded?
Yes and no. The circumstances are very different. First of all, the eras are different, and you can never compare what's going on in the world 35 years later, okay? But the main thing to remember was the Edmonton Oilers were in financial straits at the time. That's not the case with the Kansas City Chiefs or the Denver Nuggets or whomever. So they needed money. Peter Pocklington, the owner, was pretty desperate. And there was some chatter. It was all in the background. Could Gretzky get traded? And the thought was probably not, but Pocklington's pretty desperate. And it started to build. Okay. And I don't even think we truly know the answer why and how Wayne got traded. Because if you look back, if you read the stories then or any videos or anything, there's always 2 or 3 sides to the story. You hear Bruce McNall say, hey, I had Wayne in my office a few times. We talked about it since Wayne had just gotten married to Janet. I think it was like a month earlier or something like that. And she's from LA, or at least she originally from St. Louis, but she she's living in L.A. She's in the acting business. Where else would you want to get traded? So Canada blamed all of it on Janet, that she was the Yoko Ono for breaking up the Beatles. The whole routine, same exact story. It was so ridiculous. Okay, then you have McNall saying, yes, I want him, but I think the one guy that's forgotten more than anybody is Dr. Jerry Buss, because Buss owned the Kings and the Lakers before Bruce McNall bought his whatever it was 51%, so he could be the majority owner at the time. And Jerry Buss is the one who opened the talks with Pocklington a while back. He was just trying to say, hey, this is Los Angeles. We need stars here. If you are ever thinking of trading Wayne Gretzky, please, we're we're waiting. We're just call me at 3 a.m. I don't care, right? So it was Jerry Buss who just set the table early on, and then when he became a minority owner, the talks were still there, and McNall was very personable. He was not afraid to say hello to the Gretzkys of the world, and they became friendly. I don't know how much friends they were, but I know they had dinner at times before he was with the Kings. And so you could just sort of feel like, okay, something is brewing there, but you still had to have an Edmonton owner that's willing to say, hey, we're going to trade the greatest player who ever lived. And he got $15 million, which was a lot of money in 1988. And that's or 89. And that's exactly, I think, the impetus to the entire thing was the major cash involvement, not the players or the first round picks or anything. That helped him get out of his own financial situation. But it's hard to compare. Like I said, if Patrick Mahomes got traded now, it would be in some respects more of a shock. So it's like, hey, they don't need the money. What would you? And no team needs the money in the NFL. I mean, they make they make mega millions before they sell one ticket. It's not like that in the NHL. But so that was part of, and then you had the Wayne Gretzky side of the story where he says, I didn't ask to be traded. And a lot of people thought in Canada, he did ask to be traded for a couple of reasons. He was going to be a free agent the following year. He wasn't going to sign his contract at the time. He wasn't going to sign an extension until he felt comfortable. They were going to give him the money. And then there was the money situation with his team. So, but he loved playing there. He loved his teammates. Him and Mark Messier, they're Siamese twins. I mean, and then you just go down the list of great players on that team. It's definitely the greatest offensive team of all time. And so there were so many reasons why he would never want to leave. And I think Janet was pregnant at the time, if I remember correctly. So they were going to have their first kid. They just got married. So there was, okay, so we're going to raise our kid in Edmonton or in Los Angeles. And there was, good and bad for every scenario. So there was all of that. So you had McNall saying, I want to get Gretzky, whatever it takes. Pocklington saying, not out loud, I need the money, but he definitely needed the money. And Gretzky with his own, hey, what am I going to do the next 10 years of my life? And I'm going to start to raise a family. So it was all those scenarios at one. They just all converged. And then here we had the unbelievable news conference down in near the airport.
Well, I definitely want to get your thoughts on that because I know you were there, but there have been some big trades in LA sports history. But this one seems, I think, to kind of transcend that because of the circumstances, because you had, I mean, look, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came to the Lakers. Wilt Chamberlain came to the Lakers, but the Lakers were already, I don't know if they were established, but they've been kind of a glamour team. The Kings weren't. So this was not only was the greatest player in the game being traded still, at the top of his game, but going to a place that needed something to jumpstart it, to get it on the map. So when it comes to trades in LA sports history, I would assume Gretzky's got to be one.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It's funny. I remember vividly. I don't remember vividly what he said, but I remember vividly speaking to Bob Miller at the press conference afterwards. And I talked to him and Jimmy Fox, and I talked to Wayne. I talked to a couple of players who were there. I believe I got a few minutes with McNall as well. As a matter of fact, I got a quote that I kept in front of me that I'll read to you later from McNall. It's pretty funny, actually, about finally getting this deal done. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt it's the biggest trade because what Bob Miller, he just kept shaking his head. I can't believe we got Wayne Gretzky. I just can't believe it. He just kept saying that. And we all did. Again, up until that day, you heard a little bit here and there, but you just didn't believe it until you saw it. And then there he was, right up there, putting on the new Kings jersey, the new colors, and Dr. Buss was standing right behind him, helping him put the jersey on because he was heavily involved in that. So there's no question it's the biggest trade in LA sports history, and there have been some great ones.
We're going to have more with Ted Sobel, award-winning LA Sports Radio reporter, in a moment. We're going to talk about that press conference and what it was like here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. But real quick, take your first swings at betting on Major League Baseball with FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. It's $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you could spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under, who you think will hit the first home run, all on an app that is super safe, secure, and easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in a bonus bet. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we're back with Ted Sobel. And Ted, that trade, as you mentioned, it didn't come right out of the blue. You mentioned Jerry Buss, of course, a little bit more famous for being the Lakers owner, had approached Peter Pocklington, the owner of the Oilers back in the day, and then Bruce McNall, when he came in to own the Kings, he approached him as well because they knew the value of star power. They knew that this was a trade to get the Kings on the map. So it wasn't really kind of out of the blue. This was floated around, and Wayne Gretzky had to at least have considered it, right? He had to have at least thought about it. I think if he wanted to stay in Edmonton, he definitely could have, but this wasn't completely out of the blue like some people think it was.
I don't know how easy it was for him to accept the trade because, again, you're just coming off another Stanley Cup win and another a Conn Smythe for him. And I mean, he was just all world all the time and in his prime. Let's not forget that too. It's not like he was 37, like, well, let's just get rid of him. We don't want to pay him anymore. So, but he accepted it for some of the reasons we already talked about. And I think that it got to a point that he felt comfortable with McNall and he said, you know what, this is not a bad move for me. I don't want to leave all my buddies in Edmonton. I don't want to leave Edmonton. I mean, he really loved it there. And he was God, of course, and he should have been. But I think there was something about this thing coming to Los Angeles and saying, you know what, we can build something here. And Wayne's a competitor, and it's one of the great challenges. And it was a challenge to get young Eddie Garcia to become a Kings fan because he wasn't yet, and it was that kind of a thing where he jumped in and said, I'm going to embrace this. And let's face it, he's not just a great player. It was the timing of it that made it the greatest trade in sports history too. The timing being Los Angeles needed a star in hockey to build the sport. The league needed a star in the Southern Hemisphere, and that changed everything. And the San Jose Sharks would not be the San Jose Sharks if it wasn't for Wayne Gretzky. They would not exist, as the same with the Mighty Ducks at the time. And I think there was one team south of the Mason-Dixon line at that time, and it was the St. Louis Blues. Otherwise, nothing south of St. Louis. So you think about how that changed the league. And yes, it was star power, but it gave the league something. It gave the league an NBC contract a few years later that they never would have gotten, ever. So, I don't know. It would be fascinating to see the true experts and business side of the game have an hour with them. What would it be like if Wayne Gretzky wasn't traded to the Kings right now? That would be a fascinating show because most of these teams would never have existed. And look at the way Southern California hockey built up immediately because of him. And how many players now grew up in LA and they were playing in the NHL? I mean, it's fascinating to see that. Never would have happened without Wayne.
Yeah, and it's, when you talk about the most impactful trade in like North American sports history, it wasn't just because of the impact it had on the Kings, but the impact it had on the league and how it
Absolutely.
grew and things like that. Okay, so there were two press conferences the day Wayne Gretzky got traded. There was one in Edmonton where he's crying and it's like a funeral. And then he comes to LA and you were there at an airport hotel, I believe it
Yep,
was in
right down the
LAX.
street from LAX, yes.
And obviously a much different feel. But what was it like to be at that press conference? You've covered a lot of press conferences, a lot of events. How does that compare? What was that like? Give us a sense of what it was like to be there. And again, how does that compare to any other press conferences you've been to?
Well, hundreds of press conferences I've probably been to. I want to compare it. It's total opposite though. But as far as being important, the Magic Johnson HIV news conference, I was there, and I wrote a whole chapter for my future volume for my book Touching Greatness on that, and the emotions in that room. When I walked in that room, there were cameramen and writers in the corner crying, and he hadn't even made the announcement yet because we thought he's dead. He's dead. So, that's a totally different guy. But from an important standpoint, from a local issue, Wayne's same level, but other side of the spectrum. I got there early, and I just remember the podium in the background. I went to dozens of Kings news conferences, and it was usually me and a couple of other people, or a handful, that maybe the Times beat writer. If it wasn't a big deal, maybe one TV station was there, maybe, that kind of thing. This was like, wow, is this the Academy Awards? I mean, what the hell's going on here? Every TV station was there. Radio stations were there that didn't even know how to spell hockey, like news stations and stuff. I didn't work for the news station. I did a little bit of work for KNX, which is still around now at the time, but I don't even remember what I was covering for. It was probably like AP or UPI or one of the reporting groups out there, national ones. But it was fascinating to see how many photographers were there. And I mentioned in my book that it sounded like machine guns going off when Wayne Gretzky came out from behind. There were so many. Yeah, exactly. They didn't have the quiet cameras like they have now. It was and just nonstop. And I was looking around to see who's aiming at me. It was unbelievable. And then the writers were. I don't remember how many people, but by far it's the most I've ever seen at a news conference. And I think it was more, and I'm guessing even more than the Magic Johnson, because they closed off. We were in the Forum Club for the Magic Johnson one, and the Inglewood Fire Department was there, and they said no more people. So they shut it off. This was a big, like a banquet hall room in the hotel where we were. They just set up the stage and the whole thing, and then we were in the background and a little lift. And I remember always trying to move around. Us stupid radio guys is like, hey, get off the stage. You're moving the camera, the bottom of it, right? And it's like, I'm just trying to find a good spot here. I plugged in my audio equipment and just raring to go. And I'm sure I got a couple questions in, but the bottom line was that Wayne was mostly smiles then. There was still a little left over, like, I can't believe this is happening. It was the same day. It was like just hours earlier. He and McNall jumped on their private plane, flew from Edmonton to LA, and it's like, okay, time to be happy now.
Yeah.
I mean, you never see that anywhere.
For real. So I try to look at things that are going on today and equate it to other things so people can relate to it. I don't know if anyone's paying attention, but in the MLS, Lionel Messi has joined this Miami team who had nothing going for them, weren't on the map at all.
They had David Beckham going.
Yeah. And so he's now drawing all this attention to himself, that team, and the league that otherwise they would not be getting. And I'm thinking maybe that's a little taste of kind of what it was like when Gretzky came to LA a little bit. Is that maybe a little bit of a comparable at all? I'm not
following the MLS very closely.
Well, neither am I, but I'm talking about it on our station, right?
Yeah, but you know what? I don't think that's any bigger, and I don't think it's as big. I could be wrong. I don't think it's as big as when Beckham came to LA. When David Beckham came to the Galaxy, it was like, what David Beckham, even though I think I'd have to look it up. I don't know the difference in age when they did come here, but Beckham was on the other half of his career. And I think Messi is too, right? I mean, he's not in his prime anymore. He's still great, but he's not as great as he was 5 years ago, if I have it correctly. So there's similarities there. But David Beckham came to Los Angeles. Miami is a tiny town compared to LA when it comes to national sports. So I think Beckham was bigger. I could be wrong. Again, I'm looking from totally on the outside, but I get what you're saying, and the importance to the league is something where you could do maybe a little. It's like MLS needs a Beckham or a Messi for sure to get on the map with the other sports, because I don't know if they're ever going to. Not in my lifetime. Of course, I look at my second hand now in my lifetime, so I don't know what's going on. But maybe in your lifetime, it'll be up there in the top 4 or 5 sports. Who knows, right?
We'll have some more with Ted Sobel, author of the book Touching Greatness, in a moment here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Quick reminder to check out Locked On NHL Monday through Friday, all year round. It's your source for all of your latest hockey news. That's Locked On NHL. It's on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast as well. So trying to keep the theme of, what it was like when Wayne Gretzky came. I know we had Fernando Mania. He just got his number retired recently. I don't know how that took that long, but what was it like? What was Gretzky Mania like when he finally did get to LA? Came and just, I can't even imagine what it was like for any Kings fans at that time to, be going to games and good seats are still available. And suddenly Wayne Gretzky's on our team and the house is packed. What a change. What a metamorphosis.
I totally remember the next day after the news conference, hearing stories about that it is bonkers at the Forum, that they're getting a ridiculous amount of calls for season tickets. And I don't recall if it was sold out immediately. I think it was, but I do know that it was the first time. So 89, that would have been right. 89. I'm losing track here. I always think of 88. That was the year the Dodgers won their last real World Series. 89. So you're talking about the Kings started in 67, right? So a little more than 20 years had gone by, and they had never had a sellout on opening night. Ever.
Wow.
Ever. First time. Think about that. That's insane. You would have think they would have found, 10,000 Canadians in the street somewhere. Just say, hey, come over. Let's, get your seats for opening night. Never happened until that first year. So that was a big thing to remember. And the other thing I'll never forget is Wayne Gretzky, his first shift, he scored. So, it's like, what? It was a fix in here? And the place went nuts. That was so great. But the impact locally, when you saw as many stars coming to the Kings games as the Lakers games, I was there from year one. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was insane. And on a regular basis, I'd be going down to the locker room after a game, and there would be the guy who eventually played Herbie Brooks in Miracle, right?
Kurt Russell.
Yeah, he was regular down there with his wife or his partner, whatever you want to call it, right? And they had their little baby there, who now is a famous actress. I can't think of her name. I'm sorry. What's Kurt Russell's daughter's name?
I know her too.
Yeah. Anyway, not important, but she was just a little baby.
Kate Hudson. Kate Hudson.
Thank you. Yeah, because her father is one of the Hudson brothers. Okay, before Goldie Hawn, her mother, was with Kurt Russell. But anyway, so you'd see them there, right? And you'd see Tom Hanks there regularly. He was there all the time. The amazing person that you saw there, while he was president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, sitting behind the glass. Come on. That didn't happen for Marcel Dion or Luke, right? They were great players, but Ronald Reagan was begging McNall for tickets. That's fascinating stuff.
So we talked a little bit about the impact that he had on hockey in LA. And you mentioned this earlier, and I've always wondered, and it sounds like you definitely believe this, that if it's not for Wayne Gretzky, there's no Anaheim Ducks, there's no San Jose Sharks. If that's true, again,
Well, it's, you know what? It's true for when they came in. Now, who knows? 10 years later,
right. He
things
accelerated the
evolve.
process of everything,
Totally,
right? Yeah,
totally. But
I
I mean,
totally
it's
see that.
not a coincidence that all of a sudden you didn't find teams coming up in Minnesota or in Maine. I mean, they're all Southern teams after that, right? So, and Minnesota moved to Dallas, and this team moved to, and Hartford moved to Carolina. I mean, none of that stuff. And then Florida teams, there were no Florida teams. There weren't even thought of Florida teams at that time. I remember the first time when Florida Panthers were, it's like, what? Is that going to make it? And they've struggled on and off over the years. They, to this day, when they win, it's great. And when they win, everybody says, oh, what a successful franchise. When they're not winning, it's like, hey, it's not so great down here.
Tampa Bay has been pretty good, though. Tampa Bay has been pretty good.
Yeah. But would they be good if they weren't such a great team, though?
Oh, sure, of course. I mean,
they were not good. Phil Esposito, until they started winning about 10 years ago, whatever it was now, Esposito was like trying to sell hockey in Tampa all the time. So it's, it wasn't simple. It looks easy now, but it wasn't easy going around.
Yes, I mean, Ted, we could talk about this for hours and hours.
I know, it's great.
It was an unbelievable trade. It's awesome that the LA Kings obviously were involved in it, because who knows what the direction and the course of the franchise would be at this point. You just can't predict with the dominoes falling.
Yep.
But it was one of the, if not the greatest, most impactful trades in the history of sports, certainly at least in North America. It was cool to get your firsthand account of things. Anything you just want to wrap it up when you think about that day?
I have a couple of quotes that I put in my book that I thought your listeners would enjoy.
Please.
Because the talk was that McNall was asked for Luc Robitaille and Jimmy Carson, who had come off his phenomenal year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce didn't want to give up Luc. And Gretzky told him. Gretzky was playing GM, even though Rogie Vachon was the general manager at the time. It was Wayne who said, I got to have Marty McSorley. I got to have Mike Krushelnyski. He's the one who said, those are coming with me. If you want me, I got to have those guys. And he got him, right? So they wanted Luc, and Wayne said, no, you're not trading Luc. I got to have somebody to pass it to, I mean, give me a break. So what McNall told me verbatim, I asked him, were you close to a deal sending Luc and Carson for Wayne? And his comment, quote, well, we weren't close to it, but they wanted Robitaille, Carson, and 18 other players, about 19 other draft picks, and $1.6 billion in dollars, right? I think they wanted to settle the national debt in one deal. That's what he told me that day at the news conference. And then I asked Jimmy Fox his reaction. He said, immediately sent a chill down my spine. I can't believe we have Wayne Gretzky. So I think that sort of sums it up right there. From the management standpoint to the ex-player, then announcer Jimmy, although I guess Jimmy Fox was very new to the booth then. I don't even remember anymore. But just think about how that happened. And I go back. It's funny because I think of Wayne personally. We both started in pro hockey. He's slightly more important than me. We both started pro hockey the exact same year, right? And the guy who let him go to pro hockey from his junior team was a coach for the first team I ever announced for. His name was Muzz McPherson. He was Wayne's head coach in Ontario. So and we used to tell stories he would tell me stories about Wayne. And Wayne wasn't this like national treasure yet. He was in the WHA first year. He was a rookie. Right. And they were just hoping he was going to be some kind of whatever Wayne Gretzky could be. So it's just fascinating stuff and then all these years later, Wayne endorses my book, Touching Greatness, with stories about him in it. So it full circle, baby. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, Ted, it's great to get to talk to you about this and talk to somebody who obviously was there as it happened. It was an amazing moment in sports, certainly one of the greatest moments, well, probably the greatest moment in the history of the Los Angeles Kings, even greater than their 2 Stanley Cups, which was pretty great. But great to talk to you.
Should have been 3. Should have been 1 with Wayne.
Yes, that's true. Believe me, that's when I first got on board being a Kings fan, and it's still the stick with Marty McSorley still is a sore subject. But
Marty.
Great to talk to you, Ted.
Teddy.
Always appreciate getting your perspective on things. And again, the book is Touching Greatness. Go and check that out. It's not just about hockey, but it's about a lot of other things and all the things you've covered and seen in your time as
on Amazon, by the way.
Longtime LA sports reporter. All right, Ted, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.
You got it.
All right, that was Ted Sobel. Hope you guys enjoyed that, getting a little taste of again, what it was like when Wayne Gretzky was traded to the LA Kings. It was an amazing, amazing trade. There's documentaries about it. There's books about it. If you're more interested in that, you can check those out as well. But that was cool to get to talk to Ted about that. All right, for you everydayers, you know what's coming up on Friday. It is our weekly Kings fan feedback show. All your questions, all your comments, anything going on with the LA Kings, anything we talked about with this interview, you can send an email, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And of course, you can always leave your comments in the comment section on the YouTube episodes as well. You want to follow us on Twitter, want to follow us on Instagram, we are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings, go.